Hey guys, how's everyone doing? Hi Mel's AK. Hi Whitney, hi Toes. This is Dara here. How's everyone doing? I'm really excited to be here today. And it's exciting to know that we're going to be having Coach Drew here today. Oh, Coach Drew is here. Awesome. Hi, Coach Drew. Good to have you here. I'm really excited. How has everyone been? Awesome. Again, my name is Dara, and I'm going to be, hosting today. And it's interesting that we're going to be having an amazing time. I'm really excited already. Yes, we have an amazing speaker. It's great to know that Coach Drew is here in the house today. We'll probably just wait for a few more people. We'll just wait for a few more people. Hi, Motari. Good to see you. Hi, Coach Drew.
Hey Dara, how are you?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. I'm
I'm
outside.
well. How are
Take-
you?
I'm okay. I'm trying to take advantage of this
Nice, nice.
wonderful
Great weather
weather.
today.
So
Yeah.
if you're having trouble hearing me, just let me know and then I'll head back inside or something.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, it's so clear for now. Like right now, I can hear you like really well.
Good, good, good.
Yeah. Hi, Consulant. I can see you. Hi, Uncle Floyd. It's so good to see everyone. Right. So again, it's great to have Coach Drew here. If you guys don't know who Coach Drew is, I'm gonna do a bit of blowing of his trumpet here. Again, my name is Dara, and I'm gonna be hosting you guys today, and I believe that we're gonna have a fantastic time this evening with Coach Drew. So Coach Drew is the founder and CEO of the Healing Communication Center. He's a mentor, he's a counselor, he's a speaker. He's done a lot of amazing works over the years with young people, young boys, young girls, and then just pretty much supporting them, like, through their healing process. And you guys, he's on YouTube. You can check him out on Coach Drew Can, where he talks about learning, healing, growing. He has amazing content in there. And guess what, guys? He's also an author. Goodness, you guys should. Wherever it is you are, you can just, thumbs up to Coach Drew. Just he's doing an amazing job, and with the book he authored, The Art of Genuine Apology. That seems like a very great title that everyone should check out and then get a copy for themselves. So we're just gonna dive in now. I believe we're going to have an amazing time today with Coach Drew. We're going to be talking about suicide. We've been, doing the S series for a couple weeks now, and it's really been good. And today we're going to be talking about suicide. If you have questions, please just drop them in the comment below, and would be happy to send them to Coach Drew, and he will definitely be happy to give us answers. Again, it's very good to see everyone. Grab something, a nice drink, snacks, whatever you have, and then just sit down, relax and enjoy. Okay. Well, so we're going to be starting. I know that it's not news to us that suicide is something that is really sad and really heart-wrenching, and I'm sure that a lot of people must have heard, maybe like maybe a family member, or maybe heard about a friend, or even seen it in the news that someone committed suicide. And a lot of times this is something that even loved ones cannot get over, right? Friends cannot get over. Even people who don't even know these people who do that, it just keeps going through your mind, like what went wrong, what happened. So, Coach Drew, you want to share with us, on how did people even get to that point in their lives where they felt like, what, I'm done, like we're just going to just call it quits.
I think that while everyone is different, there are some commonalities that I've found with people who have attempted to take their lives or have really considered it. And we'll double back soon to talk about different kinds of thoughts. But what is common is we feeling hopeless, and we no longer believe that there is another way, that there's a solution, that I have the ability to impact change in my situation. Some other common thoughts are that, you know, God doesn't see, He doesn't hear, He doesn't care, He won't help me. Again, a loss of power, a loss of agency, a loss of control in life that leads to a sense of hopelessness. And what I don't think many people from the outside of that experience can appreciate is the degree of suffering that's happening for that person. And I've never met someone who endured that kind of suffering for just a minute or a day. It's usually months. It's usually years. It's usually they've tried different things, and they haven't found success. They haven't found relief for an extended period of time. So it comes back to that sense of hopelessness. And many factors can. It's depression, sometimes it's anxiety, sometimes it's trauma from the past, sometimes it's spiritual influences. You know, so there are many factors that contribute to people getting to that place where they experience that hopelessness and that loss of control and power and agency.
Right. And you see, especially with the current situation we are in, you know, how it's been very challenging for a lot of people. There are times that we've never lived before, that you know we haven't even never what's gonna happen. So in this situation, what would you say, you know, young people can do? Because I mean, it's funny because this whole situation doesn't just affect young people. It was very sad when I heard the news about a teenage girl who was less than 15 last year, you know, who committed suicide. And you see, the funny thing about this was that this girl seemed very happy. I mean, she came across as a happy child, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
eventually she killed herself. So in
yeah.
this situation where we find ourselves, what would you say would, you know, help young people, even middle-aged people, if even, you know, older people, to just go through the phase and not just say, you know what, I'm done, and you know, goodbye to life, goodbye to loved ones.
So definitely, you're right. It's not an experience that just impacts the young or the old.
Mm,
And what's different is even though the feelings and some of the thoughts may be similar, the context and the situation is so different, because someone who is older in their life might have different situations that are contributing to their sense of hopelessness. It might be the loss. It might be, you know what, everybody around me is dying, right?
mm,
Whereas somebody who's young, they're looking ahead through life, if this is the way it's going to be. Now, so to the question, if I'm hearing the question correctly,
mm,
what can we do? What can we say to those people?
mm.
And I think it starts by cultivating listening.
Right. Mm,
Hurt the person. It's about their experience. How did they experience you? How were they impacted by your actions? Unless you listen for that, you're not going to be able to offer an apology that's going to impact them. So being sincere is not good enough.
It's about understanding the other person's experience. In order to understand the other person's experience, it's important to not be judgmental, right? And a lot of us, we have our beliefs, we have our values, and they roll into judgment. We listen to people based on our life experience, and we say, well, it shouldn't be that difficult, right? Why are you letting that bother you? We sometimes we're so afraid of feeling pain that we try to turn down the volume on other people's pain. We don't appreciate what it's like to be them, right? And there's lots of parts to that, but I'll start with that. It's so important that we learn to hear someone's experience and empathize with it. And sometimes we can't relate, which makes it hard to empathize. But it starts with the listening, and it starts with valuing the other person's perspective, right? Even if you haven't experienced.
Coach Drew, Coach Drew, Coach Drew, 1 minute, please. Feedback that they can really know. So are you able to? Well, I can hear you, but there's a feedback that we can't really hear you. Some of the participants can't really hear you. Can you hear me, Coach Drew? Hello? Hello, Coach Drew? Hello, Coach
Can
Drew?
you hear me now?
Yeah,
Hi there.
participant can hear you. So for those watching, please let's know if you can hear Coach Drew now, okay?
Can you hear me now?
Oh wow, they're saying they can't hear him at all. Whoa. That's a bit.
I just switched over. Oh, you can hear now. You can hear now.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'll backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
I was talking about basically how we respond and how we engage. If somebody is vulnerable enough to share how they're feeling and what they're thinking, it is important for us to be able to listen well, to be able to empathize and not be judgmental. And it gets difficult for a number of reasons. We all have our biases, we all have our beliefs, we all have our values. And sometimes when we listen through those lenses, even when we want to help, we end up hurting by shutting down the conversation, causing the person to feel unheard and judged. Right? So part of the challenge is learning how to empathize and be non-judgmental when somebody is brave enough to share. So I'll give some context and some explanation as best as I can. But remember when I was saying earlier, even though people have different experiences, a lot of the thoughts are similar.
Right.
So that feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness is often connected to a thought and a belief that this is never going to change. I can't handle this. God doesn't love me. Nobody cares. There's no point in going on. Now, these are thoughts. They are not facts. They're thoughts. And they then fuel the emotions which lead to the actions, which lead to the choices. So a lot of the times we see the facts differently, so we don't think those thoughts and we don't feel those emotions. So we
Right.
don't empathize. And then we come across as judgmental because we want to encourage people. We want to tell them to do the right thing. But people won't feel better unless they think better,
I love that.
right? A lot of us want people to feel better, but we don't understand that it's important for them to be able to think better. And we don't just go in people's head and change their thoughts. That's not how it works, right? If somebody is brave enough to even give you an inkling of what they're feeling, it's best to empathize. And and here's what's a little tricky, because a lot of the times we're we are hesitant to engage with people on an emotional level like that because we feel a sense of responsibility and we don't feel prepared to handle it, which is why it's good to have other people in your life, other resources that you can connect people to, that you can take them to, that you can say, you know what, I will go with you. You know what? I will help you find the resources, right? We'll go to church, we'll request financial support to whatever. Like those are things that we can do, but again, it helps when we are empathizing and we're not being judgmental. So um, one one of the significant differences that people aren't aware of is that there's a difference between validating and agreeing with somebody's perspective and their experience. It's a nuance, but it's a big one. So if somebody says, you know what, I feel like, because that's one of the phrases people use, I feel like there's no point. For starters, I feel like is not a feeling.
I love that.
It's a phrase that precedes a thought. So an emotion is one word. So if somebody says, I feel like there's no point. That's a belief. What they're saying is, I think to myself and I'm telling myself the way I see the world, there's no point. And that's causing me to feel hopeless. So when we say, oh, you know what? Let me try to see it from where you're coming from. Oh, you don't have enough money to pay the bills. Oh, you lost your job again. Oh, you know, this is happening. This is happening. And from your perspective, it's like nothing is going to change and you have no power. I get why you feel hopeless. Like, I get it. I get it. Notice I validated,
Right.
but I didn't agree. I
Mm.
didn't agree. So when we do that, we present ourselves as open to their experience and not judgmental. If we jump in and say, no, that's not true, no, that's not true, no, that's not true, as much as you might be right, they're most likely going to feel unheard.
Absolutely. And no one wants to hear that.
Right? You know, so a lot of the times we say, well, I'm just giving tough love. It's a thin line, and it's important to know when people are ready for tough love and when they are ready to be heard. And you know, one of the scriptures that really speaks volumes to me is God gives he gives many invitations, but two stand out to me. Come unto me, all ye who are labor and are heavy laden. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly of heart, and you will find rest unto your souls. And that's what people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, that's what they need. They need rest from the burdens that they're carrying in their minds and in their life experience. And if we're not at a place where we can empathize with them and listen and be with them, then they're carrying that burden on their own. Another invitation that I hear God make, and he makes it to me, he makes it to all of us. He says, come, let us reason together. I love it because the scriptures talk to us about the renewing of our minds. That we get to do with God, so we can bring our thoughts and our hearts into alignment with his. So when he invites us, he doesn't say change the way that you think, right? He exposes us to his truth and to his presence. He's the God of all mercy, the God of comfort. He comforts us in our time of need. And when I come to him with my suffering, and I'm open to, because one of the things that I do, I have this resource on my site. It's the 6 keys to effective journaling.
Mm-hmm.
And effective journaling is one of my modes of prayer, because I tease apart my emotions from my thoughts, right? Because it's not until I tease them apart and I define the thoughts that I could say, oh, this doesn't line up with scripture. But when they're fused together, it's very difficult to acknowledge what I'm feeling is not the fact. It's very difficult to acknowledge those. So
I love that.
as I journal, I separate them, and I might say, you know what, God, I'm feeling really frustrated, and I'm telling myself, I own my thoughts. I own my thoughts, and I say, you know what, I'm telling myself that there's no point here. Or I might say, you know what, the thought that comes to me right now is that you're not listening, God, that you're not going to help me. But then when I acknowledge that, I'm like, well, but what do you tell me? You tell me you're a very present help. You tell me the work that you started in me, you will complete it. You will finish it. And I reinforce my faith when I come into alignment with what he's telling me, what he has said. And I think that's a skill that we haven't learned. We haven't learned to be aware of our thoughts. We can't be in alignment with God if we don't know what we are believing. We healthy thoughts if we're not being intentional about renewing those thoughts. So this is not something that we're taught in school. We're taught to do math, but we're not taught to be aware of what we're thinking and what we're telling ourselves. And it's more difficult for some than others, but it's also more difficult the more stressed we are and the more multiple issues that we're carrying. It makes it harder to think and manage our thoughts. So I'm sharing the context of all these factors that go into somebody coming to a place of feeling hopeless and not being aware that they're having these thoughts over and over and over, and the suffering that goes along with that. When we start to appreciate that, then we can say, okay, this is pretty significant, right? Even if I can't change the way that you think, I can walk with you.
Absolutely.
Right? I can help you bear this by being with you. And a lot of the times people are alone. They feel so alone. They don't think that anybody else can help them, that anybody else will listen. They don't want to burden anybody else. And they feel destitute and alone. So by helping people know that they're not alone, right? By becoming more familiar with how people are feeling and what they're thinking, we can be closer to them in their time of need. Again, being non-judgmental, being empathetic, really learning how to listen to what somebody is feeling and tease that apart from what somebody's thinking, and then connecting them to supports that they might need that you might not be able to provide.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing this, Coach Drew. I think what stood out for me is actually being empathic and not being judgmental. That is really amazing, because when someone is able to trust you to know that, oh, if I share these concerns with this person, there's no judgmental feeling. So that person feels like you're actually their safe space, right? And they're able to share things that actually bother them. And I think something that also stood out for me is, before even getting to the level of suicide itself, it all starts from what the person is thinking, which you just kept, saying over and again. So another thing I would just have you touch on, Coach Drew, is this. So if this is a situation where it's the person going through this, so it's not a function of a friend, right? So it's an individual actually going through, the whole suicide thoughts, thinking, oh, I feel hopeless, I feel worthless. How is that person able to manage that? I'm sure that a lot of our viewers have learned a lot about how to handle it if it comes to a friend or a loved one, listening, being there for the person. So how is that individual able to handle it when it comes to a situation where they are the ones actually going through all those tough times?
Yes, yes, good question.
Mm,
Okay, so there are so many things that we can do if we are experiencing suicidal thoughts.
yeah.
Um, where do I guess I could start anywhere. So, one of the things that, depending on where we are and the level of risk and the level of concern,
Mm,
that will determine what we do first. So if you are having suicidal thoughts, and there's a spectrum, okay? There's a range of intensity of suicidal thoughts. So if the thought crosses your mind every now and then, right? Oh, I wonder what would happen if I drove my car off the road,
mm,
or the statement to say, oh, another day, I don't want to get up, I hate life,
mm,
right? That's not suicidal,
right.
because sometimes we elevate thoughts to a level of intent in our own minds. We think, because this thought crossed my mind, I must be suicidal. And
Mm,
then our level of concern and worry for ourselves goes through the roof, which intensifies our stress level, which makes us less likely to be able to calm ourselves and think and navigate the situation.
mm,
So it's important to understand there are different kinds of thoughts. There are automatic thoughts that happen when you find yourself in repeated situations. There
mm,
are passing thoughts, right? There are intrusive thoughts,
right.
right? Thoughts that interrupt you, that plague your mind, and they come back and back again. Sometimes it might be as a result of a traumatic situation that happened before. Sometimes it might be a matter of something that you did that you feel really guilty about. Sometimes it might be an onslaught of attack from the enemy, right? There are different kinds of thoughts. But when we get to the point where we're actually considering it,
Mm,
we don't want to get to that point, but that's a point where it's important to say, okay, I'm going to reach out for help.
mm,
If you start to think, how could I end my life? And you start to look around for ways to do it.
mm,
If you know that, I could take all these pills that I have right here, or if you find yourself walking around with a rope in your bag and
mm,
think it right, that means you're really considering it and you actually have the means to carry it out. That means you're at a level of risk where you really need some serious intervention, right?
mhm.
And that's not the time where you want to tough it out and pray it out and handle it yourself.
You need.
No, no, that's the time where you say, you know what? Even if whether it's shame or if it's
Mm,
pride or for whatever, um, I'm going to get some help.
absolutely.
I'm going to get some help. So whether that means, calling a friend, whether that means calling 911, I don't have the numbers memorized and they're in my phone, but there are suicide intervention numbers, hotlines, free supports that can really get to you to help you stay alive. And sometimes we are, like I said before, we're at that point where we don't want to.
Mm,
We're in conflict because we're in so much pain and we're suffering. And what I want to say is that there are so many factors that contribute to that, getting
mm,
to that place. And a lot of times we're not aware of it. So for me, I got really scared one day when that thought, that notion of ending my life came to my mind. I was just like, what in the world is this? What is going on? And I started calling around. I said, listen, I need a psychiatric consult. I need something, because like I've got my girls here, I've got my family, and and I'll give a little bit of a backdrop to this. What I realized afterwards was I had been suffering for about maybe a year
mm,
now, a year and a half, with a lot of things that were happening to me.
mm,
I was feeling sleepy around the wheel. I
mm,
was falling asleep. I was having trouble managing my mood and my thoughts. My energy level would go up and down. I had trouble processing, thinking. And when all that was happening, I would be going to doctors. I would, praying. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And after that moment, and I was thinking about getting a psychiatric consult, I was saying to myself, well, it's not constant. It's interrupting my life, but it comes in spurts and I can't control it. I'm worried that I won't be able to work. I'm worried that I'm going to be a danger to my family. Um, and then the thought came to mind to fast. So I did. And when I stopped eating, I actually started to feel better. And I didn't realize that it was my diet that was impacting my moods, my emotion, my thoughts, and everything. And I know it's just one of the factors, but so I now know I have a gluten sensitivity, and it's non-celiac, so I could digest it. But I didn't realize that that was causing the change in my mood. It's causing me to feel anxious and overly sensitive and sleepy and all those kinds of things. But again, if I didn't, and I had been in this field for 13 plus years. So I had an advantage, right? I had been journaling, I had been praying, I had been processing. So it was difficult for me. So I know it's difficult for people who haven't had this kind of training. So when you're at a place where it's hard for you to think through something, that's really when it's a good time to get some help, because you are probably going to overlook a factor that's contributing to your situation.
Absolutely.
So I stopped eating gluten, and I'm feeling so much better. If I have gluten, it just like that, I might, it's again, it was a period of 1.5 years of a lot of suffering. So if I eat gluten, I get the symptoms, the sleepiness and the mood and all that kinds of stuff. But had I not become aware of that factor, I would have really stayed in that place of hopelessness. And, you know, and this other people can relate to, I think as well, I was asking, there's a difference between questioning God and asking God questions.
Okay.
And I did both. I questioned God. I'm like, what are you doing? Why is this happening to me? Like, where are you? You're not here. And then the difference is, okay, God, where do we go from here? What do we do? What do you want me to do with this? Right? And God can handle both.
I love
God
that.
can handle both. However, I found that only one is really helpful for me. Questioning God doesn't help me because it erodes my sense of faith, my sense of trust. But asking God questions, I usually get answers. So it was helpful for me to ask those questions and find these answers. So I want to encourage people, again, if that's what you're experiencing, reach out to people who can help you to consider those factors. Continue to ask God questions. I know that one of the factors is genetic, if you want to call it genetic predisposition. I look back for generations and I can see in my family the anxiety that people had. And some of it was situational because there was a lot of situations that warranted that level of anxiety. But then there were other situations where it didn't warrant it. And that was just the response.
Right.
So when I'm under pressure, I'm aware that my thoughts, they tend to lean towards all or nothing thinking. Like it's all bad. Like it's all good, and catastrophizing. So I can sit there and my thoughts are just going to swirl down the drain. I'm aware that that's how I function when I'm under a great deal of stress. So it's important for me to manage my life so that I don't overload myself, so I don't burden myself, because then it's very easy for me to get into that train of thought, right? And again, we can learn to manage our thoughts and be very skillful at it. There are ways that you can learn, like the journaling that I mentioned. There are books, Mind Over Mood. I'm sure there are lots of other books that people can read and learn to build those skills. So it is not hopeless. We can learn to manage our thoughts and our emotions. And I do believe in the power of prayer. I do believe in intercession, because people would call me and they would be like, I'm praying for you. Something's going on over there. And I'm like, yes, you're right. Pray, pray, keep praying.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I've been thinking a lot about lately is this identity and purpose. They are intrinsically linked together. And a lot of the times we don't know our purpose and we don't know who we are. And these events that happen in our lives, they are distractions. They're there to prevent us from being the best versions of ourselves, because we have so much to offer. God has a purpose. He has a plan for us. And then when we're under these spiritual attacks, or we have these distractions, then we buy into them, and we don't realize, oh, this is not about me.
That's
This
right.
is about my purpose.
That's
This
right.
is right. This is an attempt to get in the way of what God wants to use me to do to impact other people. We are all a part of the body of Christ. We are all important. We all have a role to play. And when we remember that, that can give us hope. And I think it's important to acknowledge that piece as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Coach Drew. And I really liked the last part where you mentioned that it's not even about you, it's about the purpose. And a lot of times when you're so deep into your purpose, there's a sense of joy. You're just excited because you're in purpose and you're fulfilling what God has for you. And then another thing that I found very interesting was the fact that, don't be quiet if this is happening to you, right? Seek help, of course, from trusted people. Just don't shut your mouth. Just keep spreading the word, like, I need help, and then you'd get as much support you need. And then, of course, you also
I lost your voice for a moment there.
yeah. And then, you mentioned something about questioning God versus asking God questions, and that was really valid. And, asking God questions to get answers, because, of course, if you do, He will definitely give you feedback and give you an answer to whatever question you're asking. So we have a question here from one of the viewers, and she's asking that, how do you differentiate empathy and affirming the person's negative thinking? When we were talking about, for those people, maybe friends or someone who's just going through that, and then you mentioned being empathic. So this viewer is asking that, how are we able to differentiate between empathy and affirming the person's negative thinking?
Mm-hmm. So I definitely think there are a number of things at play here. One, I think it requires a level of skill to be able to artistically challenge somebody's thoughts
Right.
without alienating them. But so the question is, how do you empathize without reinforcing negative thoughts? Again, so we want to listen and detail or delineate the thoughts clearly. So when you can label what the thought is, there's usually language that's attached to it, absolute language, right? So there's no point. I'm always going to. I never. This
Right.
is going to happen. Like, we can predict the future. It's that extreme kind of language. So
Right.
one of the ways to empathize with that is sometimes to say, you know what? Sometimes I think I have those thoughts too, right? And then you can say, but I realize it's not always, right? It's not always. It's a lot, right? When we introduce moderate language, that's one of the things that we can do. Again, people often speak in people speak congruently with how they feel and what they think. So if they're feeling something really intensely, they're going to use intense expressions, which are going to tell us what the thoughts are. So if they're experiencing intense suffering and they're saying, oh my God, like, I can't deal with this anymore. Do you hear the absolute there? Not, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Not like, this is heavy, I need a break. They're saying, I can't deal with this anymore. And that is a very disempowering, it might be a genuine expression, but I don't know how factual it is. Because many times we say we can't deal with something, and we do deal with it.
Absolutely.
Right? So when somebody says, I can't deal with this anymore, instead of saying, yes, you're right, you can't deal with this, because that would be agreeing with the negative thought.
Absolutely.
We can empathize and say, that is a lot to deal with. You're right. you know, I wouldn't want to be dealing with all that, right? So what are we going to do? How are we going to respond to that, right? And again, depending on the level of intensity, if we learn how to assess where somebody's at on that scale of risk, that will then determine our level of intervention. If somebody says, I can't deal with this anymore, I'm going to end my life, that's when you hold them on the phone and you get somebody else to call 911.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? That we're at that level of intervention. But if somebody's just saying, you know, I can't deal with this anymore, it's good to ask, what do you mean by that? Can you help me understand? Are you saying that you're going to end your life? It's important to be clear and ask questions like that, right? Are you actually thinking about ending your life? And they may be hesitant to tell you because they might not want you to stop them, but part of them wants you to be there, right? Part of them might want you to rescue them, which is why they're telling you. So when we ask explicit questions like that, then we can be closer to being supportive.
Right.
So again, to reiterate, it is difficult sometimes to empathize without reinforcing a negative thought or a negative belief, which is part of the reason why a lot of times, even culturally, we don't give room to people's emotions, because we are afraid that we're going to either fall into it or reinforce it. So that's why all these things are skills. The more we do it, the better we get at it. So being able to say, it sounds like you're feeling really hopeless. Sounds like you're feeling really hopeless. And you know what? I could see why you'd feel that way. Right? I could see why you'd feel that way. And the next tendency that we have is to say but. And it's the hardest thing to do. Sometimes it's not so bad. Like in an apology, you never want to say the word but. Because it always cancels out what you're saying before. However, instead of saying but, saying something like, it sounds like you're at a place of hopelessness. And I want us to figure out what we're going to do together. Right? Use and instead of but.
Right.
Right? And sometimes when we ask questions, it's better than telling people what to do.
I agree.
Right? So whether we say, you know, are you thinking about ending your life? Or saying something like, so where do we go from here? What do we want to do? Right? So being prepared, if you get a sense, I've had people call me a couple times, especially teenagers. Teenagers are really good at this, right? It's like they and I think because they can relate to some of the things that their friends are telling them, and they will call me, they'll email me this like, you know what, I think my friend is having suicidal thoughts. What do I do? Right? I'm like, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You call for help, okay? Then we can either connect them with somebody else, or we can give them some guidance around how to stay supportive and get a sense of what's happening, you know? So being prepared, I think, is really good for us in this season.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing, Coach Drew. I want you to just touch on this question I'm going to ask now, you know, where we could have some misconceptions about Christians not going through suicidal thoughts or going through very difficult times to say, okay, you know what, I'm done. I mean, if you're a Christian, you're spirit-filled, you're praying the Holy Ghost, you know, there's this misconception about it. You want to just touch on that for us?
Oh, sure. I think it's really simple. From my perspective, anything for anyone is possible. Whether we're talking about, well, my definition now of sin is a soul in need. We're all souls in need. So if we're talking about the possibility of us getting to that place of hopelessness, that's very possible. It's very possible. And I think when we acknowledge that possibility, it causes us to feel vulnerable and weak, but it is really a truly humble posture to take that enables us to relate to other people. When we think that an experience is beneath us, or that could never be us, we start to then see other people as weaker than we are. and it's a self-inflating kind of arrogance, to be honest with you.
I agree with you.
Because we start to think that we are better than we are. We start to think that people are less than us, or that they're weaker. And I think there's great hope. And that's what I love about being a believer, because in our weakness, his strength is made perfect. He's able to meet us where we need him most. And we run away from weakness. We run away from vulnerability as believers, because we're supposed to be strong, right? But I find that finding that balance between believing that I'm strong in him versus believing that I'm strong, period. You know, I still wrestle with that sometimes too, because I want to be strong, but I find myself so imperfect. And more I'm learning to just rely on him. And that's helpful for me. So I do believe it's possible. Do I believe it's great? No. Do I think it's ideal? No. But I do believe it's possible.
And pretty much it's still the same situation where even for Christians, if you find yourself in that situation, just seek for help. You know what we talked about like earlier in the conversation. Don't be quiet. Seek for help. Ask questions. And I like the fact that you talked about journaling, and I'm sure with your journaling journey you talk a lot to God, because I feel like I'm a writer. I'm always writing to God. I'm upset, I'm writing to him. So I feel like that's a way to just help, asking him questions. God, why do I feel this way? And also, how you mentioned speaking to trusted people to just help you through that process. Thank you so much, Coach Drew. So how we would say that prevention is better than cure, and unfortunately with suicide there is no cure. I mean, once that happens. So what would you say to viewers, and then of course people who would be watching later, to say, okay, what can we do to not even get there? We started with how did we even get there? So now what can we do not to even get to that stage where we feel like, what, I'm done?
Well, one of the pieces is self-awareness, I think. Understanding not only our identity and our purpose, but understanding how we think. And again, some of the telltale signs of how we think is how we speak. So if you know that you're prone to using absolutes, always, never, have to, those kinds of things, especially when you're stressed, if you know that under pressure you feel anxious, and if you know that you tend to take on too many things in your life, then it's important to really start to integrate practices of self-care, taking good care of yourself, really surrounding yourself with people who can be supportive and who are safe people. And one of the ways to recognize safe people is that they're pretty transparent, right? They'll share their experiences with you.
Right.
And they will, you'll get a sense about how they interact with other people, right? If they're judgmental, if they gossip and they do all those kinds of things, chances are they're not a safe person. They're not going to be able to hold what it is that you give them. So really identifying people, and sometimes it can be people who are older than you. They might not be in your friend group, right? Because a lot of times people who are older, they've gone through some wisdom to say that, and they have that humility to say, this is where I was, this is where I've been, this is what I've done. So those are the things we want to look for and that we want to listen for. I would definitely say we often overlook all of the, and this goes back to the self-care pieces, we overlook some of the important factors that contribute to us not being able to manage our thoughts and our feelings, like sleep and diet, exercise, fresh air, you know, those kinds of things. Those things are really, 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 really important. A lot of people, they have trouble with their sleep cycle. And when you have trouble sleeping, you're going to have trouble thinking. It's going to be hard to manage those thoughts. So being aware of that, There are a lot of helpful things out there that tell people how to get on a good sleep routine and cycle and regime and those kinds of things. Those things are important. Um, if you are having trouble, long-standing troubles with issues, whether it's forgiveness or guilt or assertiveness, those kinds of things, those don't go away by themselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So if you know this has been a challenge for some time, I would encourage people to prioritize looking at that, figuring out, how do I heal this situation? How do I heal this part of my heart? How do I heal this part of my life? So that they don't compound one issue on top of the next, on top of the next. Because that's what I found for a lot of people, that it's not just one issue or one challenge, right? They feel bombarded from every side with these long-standing issues. I would definitely say, and there's no judgment here, a lot of the times we cope, and we don't effectively address. We cope with
The
certain
root.
things, which then become additional burdens for us, right? So if you're coping with something that isn't healthy for you, that short term it helps, but long term, whether it's guilt or whether it's bills or whatever it is, if it's adding more stress, it's a short term coping strategy that we want to swap out for some really effective resolution. So I would say
Right.
those are some of the preventative things. Understanding your family history, I think, is also important, because if there is a pattern of certain mental health challenges, then it's good to be aware of that. So as we engage with life, we can be aware. I know for myself, when I'm under extreme pressure, I already talked about some of the all or nothing thinking that I engage in. But when I'm under real pressure, sometimes I even feel a sense of this like compulsive, some like OCD flavors of stuff where I'm starting to count, right? I'm starting to count multiples of 5. Just like, whoa, what's going on here? Andrew, you haven't felt that since you were in grade 3. Like, you're under some serious pressure here. So I see those as indications for me, like, okay, Andrew, you need
Anytime.
to slow down, slow
Yeah.
down, unpack this, right? Hear what's going on and attend to it. So it's helpful for me to know that in my family history, there were these patterns of experiences. So I'm not above and I'm not beyond that, nor am I really nailed or glued to it. But with that information and that understanding and that wisdom comes the ability to address it intentionally.
Thank you so much for sharing, Coach. We just have a few minutes to go, and I just want you to touch on something because I am also very passionate about young people, teenagers, and I was reading something on the internet where it said that this was just last year, a study from last year, which said that 1 in 8 UK young adults actually considered suicide as a result of their body image. And so I just want you to touch on that because I know that there are young people who are viewers, there are other young people who would watch, and then maybe even for parents to just help address that issue with like young people in terms of body image, body shaming, and some people even actually, took their lives because they weren't just comfortable in their body, or they just felt someone didn't like the way they looked. So you're able to just address that for us as we just round up.
Sure. I think, again, that can be a very complex situation, um, and that I don't think a lot of people understand. But a very initial kind of view of it, for some people, they can be unhappy with their body. And a lot of the times it might be because of comparison,
Right.
right? There are these standardized norms of what we think we're supposed to look like, and there's not an appreciation for what it is that they've been blessed with. And what's interesting is, this doesn't just apply to people who might be perceived as overweight. Some people have this the idea that they are underweight and they're not
Absolutely.
happy with their body. And it's not just about girls, right? This is for guys too. A lot of us brothers in the gym pumping pumping iron, trying to get D's, right? We're not happy with our bodies, right?
Mhm.
So there's the experience of what it's like to live in our own bodies, but then our beliefs about our own bodies. And you know, I think what I found, especially with this issue, is that it is so individual. Like the experiences that the people have had or grown with to cause them to not like their body, it can vary so much, right? Because some people, they have health conditions where their bodies aren't going to function the way that they want them to, and they are going to look different than their peers. Sometimes people have been bullied. I think it's hard to tease apart your body from your identity because it's really woven together. But I think there is so much to be said about the worth of a person and what makes somebody human, what gives somebody dignity, what gives somebody personhood, what gives somebody purpose, right? The unique constellation of traits that we possess, that we bring to the world, what we give in our relationships, what really matters. Um, those things are overlooked and they're overshadowed by some of our thoughts and some of our experiences. So how can we help our teens? We can do what I call deep appreciation. Deep appreciation is basically gratitude taken to the next level. So when we engage with people, we express gratitude for the things that they do, but we highlight the traits that they possess that cause them to do it. So when my daughter comes to me and she gives me a hug, I might say thank you for that hug, but I could also acknowledge you're so affectionate, right? You're so expressive, or you're so intuitive. How did you know that that's what I needed, right? When I label the trait, it speaks to the person. And even though my daughters are cute and they're beautiful, if all I say is they're cute and they're beautiful, then that sense of identity is probably going to be shaped around their looks, right? As opposed to the rest of them, right? Their sensitivities, their intelligence, their strength, you know, their devotion, like all those things. And they're 3 and 7, and I'm seeing all these wonderful traits. So even if we're concerned about somebody's physical health and their weight, it's important that we don't harp on that all the time, that we actually see the whole person and we acknowledge those wonderful parts and use deep appreciation for that too.
Absolutely. Oh wow, thank you so much, Coach Drew. It's been an awesome time. I'm sure that the viewers have had a lot of things to take from today. And one key thing that I am going to take from today is, be there for friends, be that person who is a safe space, or better still, be that person who people can come to say, oh, this is a safe place for me, and be empathic, have a listening ear. And if you are the one, going through this struggle, don't be quiet. You need to let people know that this is a situation and you need help. Thank you so much, Coach Drew. It was
So
great.
welcome.
It was great having this series with you, and I'm sure everyone is inspired. Again, guys, follow Coach Drew on YouTube, Coach Drew Can. He authored an amazing book at The Art of Genuine Apology. And yes, thank you so much for your time, Coach Drew. Bye, Coach Drew, I beg your pardon.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me, Dara.
You're welcome. Okay, guys, it was great having everyone here today. Thank you for your time. And till next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.